Hi, everyone. Welcome back to A Walk Through the Bible. Thank you for joining me for week 3. So, we started out learning, started at the beginning. God created the earth and the heavens and created Adam and Eve. We talked about the fall, Adam and Eve sinning against God and being separated from God. And this is important to think about because today we have the Holy Spirit. We have presence of God. We can stop and pray anytime we want to God, and Jesus intercedes for us. So think about this. The people didn't have that. God chose people like Noah and Abraham and Isaac and Jacob to speak through, to speak to his people. So we should just feel very blessed today as we are. And then last week we talked about Abraham's story, his faithful journey, his calling, his mistakes, and God's covenant, and the birth of Isaac, his promised son, to Abraham and Sarah when they're very old. And so this week we're going to continue the story of Isaac and Jacob and the formation of the 12 tribes of Israel. And this story shows us how God works through imperfect people to accomplish his plan. Imperfect people like me, I only know a little bit about the Bible, but I'm willing to share what I know with you. And I hope you're willing to share what you know with other people. Share this Bible study with them because I think it will help them, encourage them to dig deeper into the Bible, to learn more about the stories. And we certainly can't cover everything in the Bible. I've said that before, but we just want to cover the overview so you'll have a complete overview of the story. And then when you're digging down deeper in the Bible, it'll just be more clear. Things will become more clear to you. And so this week we start out in Genesis 23. In Genesis 23, Sarah dies, so Isaac's mom dies and they bury her. In Genesis 24 tells us the story of Rebecca, Isaac's wife, how they become to be married. Abraham and his descendants are living in Canaan, and the Canaanites are very wicked people. So Abraham does not want Isaac to marry a Canaanite or one of the wicked people in that area. So gets his entrusted servant and makes him promise to go to Abraham's homeland where they came from, his kindred people, his family, and find a wife for Isaac. And so the servant does. The servant prays to God and asks for direction, and God gives him instruction and guidance on how he's going to find Rachel, specific guidance. So it's a great story to read. And God is faithful, this plan unfolds, and Rebecca's family realizes that this is a God thing, that this is God's will. So they bless Rebecca and send her back with the servant to Abraham to marry Isaac. And Isaac is about 40 years old when he marries Rebecca. And so in Genesis 25, God uh, it tells of Abraham's death. And Abraham lived to about 165, and he was buried alongside his wife Sarah. Isaac is the promised son of Abraham, and he prays for Rebekah because she's barren and doesn't have any children. God grants him that prayer. Rebecca becomes pregnant with twins, and the Bible tells us that they struggle within her. They struggle within her womb. And Rebecca asks God, why is this happening to me? So in Genesis 25:23, this is important. God tells her, two nations are in your womb, and two people from within you shall be divided. And the one shall be stronger than the other, and the older shall serve the younger. And this prophecy will unfold in the next few chapters. When they were born, the first one was red and hairy, and they called him Esau. And the second one came out holding the heel of the first, the Bible tells us. So they called him Jacob. Isaac was 60 years old when they were born, and Isaac loved Esau because he was a woodsman. He worked in the field. He was an outdoorsman. And Rebekah loved Jacob. He hung around the tents. He was very quiet. And so they had their favorites. So there's a conflict between, this is talks about the conflict and deception in Genesis 25 through 27. In Genesis 26, God uh, promises Abraham, just as God promised Abraham, he continues his covenant with Isaac. God tells Isaac, I will multiply your offspring as the stars of the heavens, and I will give your offspring these lands. Remember God telling Abraham to go out and look at the stars, the heavens, and if he can count them, that's going to be how many offspring he's going to have. So God continues the same covenant with Isaac. When they grow up. Isaac comes in from the field. He's exhausted. He's hungry. He's starving. And he asks Jacob for some food. Jacob had some stew made. And Jacob told Esau, well, if you sell me your birthright, I'll give you some stew. And so Jacob says, what good is my birthright if I'm dead? I'm starving. You need to give me some stew. I promise. I'll give it to you. Okay. So Jacob tricks Esau into giving him his birthright for a bowl of stew. Then later, Jacob deceives his father Isaac into stealing Esau's blessing as well. And the blessing is very important in the family because we'll talk about it some more. Rebecca is listening in Genesis 27. Isaac tells his favorite son Esau, go out, kill some game, come back and cook me something good to eat so I can bless you before I die. So Isaac is wanting to bless Esau because that's his firstborn and give him his rightful blessing. Rebecca's listening, and she devises a plan with Jacob and says, go kill a goat. I'll cook something really good for your father, for Jacob, and we'll put the goat skin on your arms and around your neck. So if he touches you, you'll feel hairy. And go put on Esau's clothes so you'll smell like Esau. So they do. And the trick works. His father blesses Jacob, and Esau, when he finds out, he's very, very angry. This parental blessing is so important because it establishes the identity of the heir, the son, to the divine promise that God has given to Jacob and Isaac. Abraham and Isaac, and now Jacob. So that's why you hear Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. You don't hear Abraham, Isaac, and Esau, which would have been the firstborn, right? So traditionally that's how it works. So, but of course Esau wants to kill Jacob now that he's tricked him out of his blessing, also. So Jacob has to flee. He has to go to Haran, to his uncle Laban, and God comes to Jacob in a dream and says in Genesis 27:13 through 15, I am the Lord, the God of Abraham your father, and the God of Isaac. The land on which you lie, I will give to you and your offspring. Your offspring shall be like the dust of the earth. And God's given Jacob another example, like the stars. You can't count the stars and you can't count the dust of the earth, but it's the same thing. And it says, and you shall spread abroad to the west and to the east and to the north and to the south. And in you and your offspring shall all the families of the earth be blessed. Behold, I am with you, and I will keep you wherever you go, and I will bring you back to this land, for I will not leave you until I've done what I have promised you. So remember back in Genesis 25, God told Rebekah that her older son would serve the younger. And this is just that prophecy coming true. Um, so in Genesis 29, moving on, Jacob works for his uncle Laban for 7 years because he wants to marry one of Laban's daughters. And he wants to marry Rachel. She's beautiful and he loves her. So the day comes when it's time for Laban to give his daughter to Jacob, and he tricks him and gives him Leah. And Leah's not very pretty. He doesn't really like her, but he has to accept it. But then Laban tells him, if you work 7 more, I'll give you Rachel. He knew if he knew that Jacob loved Rachel. So he's tricked him. So remember, you reap what you sow. Jacob did a lot of tricking people. He tricked his father into giving Esau's blessing. He tricked his brother Esau out of birthright. And so he's getting repaid here. So it's not a coincidence. So Leah starts having children for Jacob. She has 4 sons, and this is getting important. Don't think this is boring because it's coming to a conclusion here very soon, very quickly. So Leah's had 4 sons, and so Rachel is barren, and she is envious of Leah. And this might sound familiar, but Rachel takes things into her own hands and gives her maidservant Bilhah to Jacob so she can have a son on their behalf. And she does. Bilhah has 2 sons for Jacob. And then Leah sees what her sister has done. And she says, well, I'm going to give Jacob my maidservant too, Zilpah. And she does. And Zilpah has 2 sons for Jacob. Later, Leah gives birth to 2 more sons. So that's 6 for Leah. Well, Genesis 30:22 tells us that then God remembered Rachel, and God listened to her and opened her womb. She conceived and bore a son and said, God has taken away my reproach. And she called his name Joseph, saying, May the Lord add to me another son. So this is Rachel's first son, and God listens to her request and gives her another son. But think about how important and special Joseph is to Rachel and Jacob at this time. They've been all this time without children of their own, and God finally blesses them with one. So Joseph is very special, and he's going to become even more special. You'll see later on next week in the story when we talk more about Joseph. So when before Rachel's second son is born, after Joseph is born, he flees from Laban. Tells Laban that I'm going to take my wives and my children and all that I have. And there's lots of stories there. Um, Jacob has worked 20 years for his uncle Laban, 7 years for Leah, 7 years to get Rachel, and then he works another 6 years for flocks so he can have his own herds and his own animals. So he's worked for his father-in-law for 20 years. So through Leah, Rachel, and the 2 maidservants, Jacob fathers 12 sons. And that's where we get the 12 tribes of Israel from. But it's going to get better. So the 12 tribes of the 12 sons of Jacob, and I have something for you to look at, and this is going to help you get a picture of in your head, so you can help remember these sons and their names and where they came from. So Leah, the first wife of Jacob, has Reuben, Simon, Levi, Judah, Issachar, and Zebulun. And then Rachel, his beloved wife, has Joseph, who we said is very special, and Benjamin. Then Leah's maidservant, Zilpah, has 2, Gad and Asher. And Bilhah, Rachel's maidservant, has Dan and Naphtali. So I hope that gives you just a picture in your head of and helps you remember those sons in the 12 tribes. But what's important is one of Leah's sons, Levi, that his people become the Levites. Well, God says those are his people. They're going to become priests. So they're not going to get land. They're not going to have a tribe. So there were -1 son. And then, as we'll see next week, Joseph, Rachel's special son, his brothers get jealous of him. And we're going to talk more about this story next week. But they sell him. So then he's not going to be a tribe. He's not going to get anything. But Joseph has 2 sons, Manasseh and Ephraim. So those are the other 2. So we're taking away Levi and Joseph out of the first 12, but Joseph's 2 sons, Manasseh and Ephraim, will make up the 12. All right, I know that was a little complicated, but you get the point. Then in Genesis 23, Jacob, this is where Jacob flees from Laban, and it's a really good story how he's fleeing back to his homeland, and he is going to confront Esau. So he's very terrified that Esau's still going to kill him, but we'll see where Esau does it. Esau has forgiven his brother and he welcomes him. And so it's really great how God restores that family relationship. But in Genesis 22 and 28, it says Jacob wrestles with God. And in Genesis 35, God changes Jacob's name to Israel, meaning one who struggles with God. And this is so important because it caused me some confusion when reading Genesis because I would hear it talking about Israel did this and that. Well, I'm thinking Israel, the Israelites? No, it's Israel, it's Jacob. So he goes from being called Jacob to Israel, and sometimes right in that time it goes back and forth. It may say Jacob and it may say Israel, so it gets confusing. And this is so important because Jacob's sons become the 12 tribes of Israel. He is Israel. So it's the 12 tribes of Israel, Jacob. And so their descendants are the nation of Israel. Okay. And so this is where the identity of God's people begin. And in Genesis 35 also gives us the death of Rachel. Like I said, Rachel, I think I said that she dies right after giving birth to her second son, Benjamin. And so Benjamin is the completion of the 12 sons of Jacob. And so we see this family conflict, the favoritism, the rivalry, and we see that God can restore those broken relationships. We see the deception and the consequences, Jacob deceiving others and then later being deceived himself. So those actions return to him. Then God using imperfect people, but his plan moves forward even though we are flawed and even though we can't speak well and uh, we don't record well. I feel inadequate when doing these, and I just know that I'm willing to let God use me, and if we're willing, He will use us and He will give us what we need to get through it, even though it may be embarrassing, it may be uncomfortable. Uh, He's going to see us through it, and so Jacob becomes Israel, and the believers have a new identity in Christ. They are the nation of Israel. And so next week, we're going to talk about Joseph's story and how he gets to Egypt. I don't want to spoil it, but just how that all came together with the 12 sons of Jacob becoming Israel and Jacob becoming his name changing to Israel. Uh, just really helped me understand a lot about what's going on. And this way, when we continue through the Bible, it makes more sense. And this is why we're going to this whole overview of the Bible. So I hope you enjoyed this week. Please go back and read some of the stories that we've talked about. If you're in Uganda and you don't have a Bible, try to find someone who has a Bible. Maybe get them interested in this Bible study. They can go back and watch the previous weeks, and maybe you can study the Bible together. And I hope you will share what you know with others as I'm trying to do. And I hope to see you again next week. Thank you.